Hello, and that's the new intro. And welcome back to my channel. I haven't streamed in again quite some time, but I thought need to get back into the swing of things, and I thought it'd be worth talking about the great man and the great man theory, and does it have a role in our future, which I think it does. And I am ever more convinced now that society is going to collapse under the weight of the current elite, current order, who are ever more distant, ever more diverting from reality, from any sort of transcendent belief, and sort of just setting themselves beyond just human nature. And so I whether it's in my lifetime or any of our lifetimes, when it comes crashing down, it doesn't really matter, but it's going to come crashing down, and it's going to be pretty messy when it does. And but the point is, in that, who, not so much what, but who will emerge from this as the sort of the heroic man, the heroic individual who will bring order to chaos. And so just for the uninitiated here, the great man theory, it's you may have seen recently, there's been in our circles, you've had like Carlyle Day, Thomas Carlyle, and you've had from the Academic Agent through to other channels, through the Wellington Project, all mentioning the in at least in passing, the sort of the great man theory, and this sort of stems from a book which was a set of essays written by Thomas Carlyle, which, if you wanted to find out, it is called. Hold on a sec. It is called the on heroes, hero worship, and heroics in history. And the purpose of this of his work was to identify 6 categories of the great man. And so first was divinity. So in Carlyle, he referenced Odin as the sort of category 1 of divinity. The second category was the prophet. So that's Muhammad, of the Islamic faith. And then the third category, you have the poet, so that'd be Shakespeare. Priest, that's Martin Luther. Man of letters, that is Rousseau. And king is Napoleon Bonaparte the First. The main structure of this, or the main purpose of this work, was to say that moments in history and societies in history which flourish, usually comes down to the actions, decisions, and the will of one individual, one man, one of the greatest men. And it's it's not just what they do um, in their lives, but also what legacy and um, how they can set. I mean, I've been talking about how they set the narrative, but I think it's even greater than that. It's not just about setting the narrative, it's about shifting the very perception of what reality is for um, their people or empire or whatever they rule over, and shift the reality to the reality that they want, the truth that they want. So, I mean, if you take the example of the Prophet Muhammad, um, the legacy of it wasn't so much his act, the man in his actions as an individual, which is that of great importance, but it was the legacy that he left behind, and that of his followers were able to carry out and conquer. I think up at that point, one of the largest extents of landmass of any empire that since the reign of Alexander, um, and so you have this. It's more defined than what I've seen go on YouTube, because in the build up to this, I wanted to see what other channels out there in the past have sort of touched on the great man theory, and I think one of the problems that I noted with them is that they seem to believe they take it more on. Um, I mean, the first of all, they approach it with the idea that it is completely nonsense. That in fact, history has been and will be and has always been determined by the underclasses, the sort. I guess you could say the peasantry, the uh, land-faring folk, the people at the bottom of all societies, and that history has just sort of emerged around all these individuals, and there has been no real control or will being implemented directly by one particular man to shift the balance or to alter, as I mentioned earlier, the reality, which that seems to be the general consensus in certain historical communities. So they completely disregard this theory. I mean, one notable uh, uh, writer and I guess philosopher, I guess you could say, Tolstoy, is one of the ones that does refute this this theory out of hand. Um, I I noticed one of the arguments that's been used by a couple of people mentioned this on YouTube is that because of um, as I said, history being determined. So this is my best one. So like someone like a Napoleon figure, obviously he lost battles, so he wasn't the great man. He wasn't perfection, and this is the thing. It's like that Carlyle refers to him as the great man, not the perfect man, and that the idea that these men throughout history suffered failure, that means that it's sort of completely the idea, it completely refutes the idea of the great man theory, and of course that's not the point. And it's really funny because you go into sort of like arguments of like, well, actually, this is they didn't you had slavery in this part, they didn't sort of economically develop much of their empire that they could have done. They didn't do this, didn't do that. But the point is that's not the sort of the point of the matter in hand. It's about the way, number one, that they rule, the way that people act and submit around them, and it's the way that the legacy that they are managed to achieve in their lifetime. And is there any seismic changes to them, well, themselves, their fellow countrymen, their fellow tribe, and also the wider society as a whole, and do they set the course on a different do they set the course of their nation on a different path than that was being set before. And when you see like Napoleon figure, um, that's very much the case. When you compare it to the revolution, to his reign, and to what happened after, you see almost like Napoleon is like the founding father of the French nation, which, um, I mean, of course, I think sort of like Charlemagne is sort of seen as the founding father, but another sort of great man. And so on the six categories, we're going to be talking about the kings today, ultimately, and we're going to be talking about we'll talk about Cromwell. We'll talk about and what Carlyle sort of talks about Cromwell and Napoleon as well, and then we'll talk about where our great heroic man will be coming from in the future, and sort of maybe what signs of indicators we can look out for. So first things first, as Carlyle points out to us, the great man has to, and this is demonstrated in all Cromwell and Napoleon in both regards, is that they have to have like a sort of metaphysical, transcendent belief in religion, and that doesn't necessarily mean a belief in a creed or a belief in a denomination or such of like Christianity or what have you, but they have to. That sort of belief is sort of like it's a driving force for what motivates them, and many of these sort of heroic willed men in history very much believe that there was a transcendent force or a god or gods or what have you, where it, it where destiny and the will of the universe, will of the gods, destiny, what have you, is what drives them, and what will they are sure themselves that they will succeed in their endeavor, in conquest or in regime change or what have you. Um, and It's and because in this bit, Carlyle talks about the saying that the belief is effectively in the unseen world, and that is that sort of connection to the transcendent belief in religion, which again, transcendent being that it's something that is a truth in both Christianity, Islam, I guess pagan religions, and all the other major religions on earth, but it's something that connects them to a higher power, which which greater than themselves, greater than their immediate families, greater than the nation, greater than all things. Um, and in many ways, thinking about it, it it further endures them to having, I think, with a higher belief in the greater power, it endures you to um, a legacy where you live, within history. You sort of transcend history in many ways. You become a figure where you are known the ages over, and I think that's sort of the sort of main crux of it, where that is one of the qualities that lead a great man, a king, would have. For he would have this transcendent belief of just being in tune, let's say, with the unseen world. Uh, and if you have a leader emerging who, as Carlyle points out, who has like false faith and is devoid from the unseen world, from this sort of transcendent, then that sort of leader will come of nothing. It will be a dud. It won't materialize into any. He won't become that sort of savior figure. It will just be another, failure of a king. Let's say. So and so Carlyle, who talks about the actual terminology of what is a king, and the it comes down to the and I can't pronounce the I believe I think it's the Celtic or Old English terminology as the Kerno or Kernic or man who knows, and so there is this wider historical and cultural understanding of all classes, even going back into the ancient times of our island's history, where there was, and we've talked about this before on my channel and other channels of the sort of great chain of being, but there was an acceptance that people knew their place, and I'm not saying know your place in a putting down way, but know their place in the role they have to play on this on this world, and that works both ways, and not just for the peasantry class, but also for that king figure. And and so the man who knows, this king, is somebody who is I guess you say the good king, is expected to be hold these qualities among their own subjects. And so this is the sort of like a figure looking up to, and I mean, like this sort of king, and so he goes on to say, the kingship over man. So you have so effectively it comes down to Rex, as he calls it, Rex or Regulatory or Regal, or the able-bodied man is what it. All the terminologies, whether it be Latin, comes down to the thing of being an able-bodied man, and something that can protect and defend and uphold his people. And that's that with the transcendent belief in the unseen world is the two qualities. So that was just setting that out there as the qualities. And so you go to let's just start with Cromwell in chronological order. So Oliver Cromwell was born to a relatively merchant class family. He was educated, as most of his peers at that age, and of course, much of his life was, before the Civil War was uneventful, but this, of course, Civil War was something that made him into this military man that we know from history today. And of course, Carlyle talks about the legacy that, because one of the interesting things about Oliver Cromwell's legacy is he's very much vilified because of, well, on several reasons. And number one, the fact that he was seen as a bit of a betrayer of the revolution, the genocide committed against Catholics in Ireland, the wars he conducted in Scotland, and so on. And then the Lord Protectorship and everything else, and sort of the undermining of Parliament. But the fact of the matter is, just take away morality of what you think of an individual and their actions, but you have to think in terms of the great man and what they accomplish, whether you like what they accomplish or not. And the reason I'm talking about Cromwell is he did set the narrative. He did redefine a long, ancient truth of the idea of we are a nation that is run by kings and monarchs into something completely different, this Lord Protectorship. with a parliamentary system of sorts. And so uh, and in the field he had immense success in warfare. Um, and then beyond this, he his legacy um, wasn't complete as such because the old regime came back, but more so, he demonstrated the qualities enough to be classed within this because he you know the problem was though, and as Carlyle points out, was you have to really look at it at the time that he was around and why he took actions in the way that he did. And it's very hard for us to to remember this when talking about it. But um, these sorts of men come up during, when I say come up, these sort of men flourish in complete chaos and disorder. And if you look at the sort of build up to the Civil War, even during the Civil War, the absolute carnage that that happened in England, across Britain, and then the massacres in Ireland between the Protestants and Catholics, the first sort of massacres, which and the lawlessness and the breakdown. And remember, on the backdrop of this, you had a sort of hostile continent as well. Um, when it came to sort of England and everything. So his actions and motivations was completely determined by what was laid out in front of him. And same thing with Napoleon, which we'll get onto. And so his I mean, and this is the thing. Like, one of the things you have is he had very few dissenters, especially amongst the Puritans, which sort of became like his vanguard of loyal supporters. And he and this is the thing you see with the great men, is that they command immense loyalty from their followers, from their people. And this is something that is, I mean, it's very rare to see today. I don't think you really can see it. I don't think it's been seen at least a century or so. And I mean, this sort of loyalty is, I mean, it's sort of natural. It naturally comes to the man, the great man. I mean, and I think it was in the first sort of chapter, on the first chapter on Odin. Carlyle talks about this sort of this fountain of light, that sort of draws everybody to it. To the great man will have emit this, like, this fountain of light that everything will be drawn to, and sort of center of political gravity will be drawn to this figure. So it's not just charisma; it's just like it's something more than just sort of emotions, and it's very much the soul of the great man that is an important sort of important trait that he holds, and that sort of determines sort of the followership that he has, and of course Cromwell had that. But the problem was, obviously, his legacy didn't. Unlike sort of Napoleon, I guess, who has more sort of positive legacy in France, Cromwell's one wasn't, because the regime that he opposed came back in some form. But the problem is he because of his course of actions, he did secure the sort of Whiggish position of that would go on to be sort of the sort of parliamentary democracy, and what go on today. So I mean, the point of the matter is, I say, I know that many people listening to this will probably disagree with, not disagree, oppose what he did, but you cannot deny that he was, he achieved something which most, and this is the problem with the great men, is achieving something which very few men can do, and that's what sets them above everybody else. And so go on to Napoleon. Napoleon was a sort of like I said with Cromwell, he flourished, and his ascendancy came from chaos, and he brought order to chaos, and that's very important for the people, for a very important um, feeling of safety, especially if you take the French Revolution, the Reign of Terror, and what sort of went on from there. It 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 was transformative. It actually brought, for many, hope, and especially like sort of various books on Napoleonic sort of era and his ascendancy beyond the sort of the mad reign of the sort of Jacobins and what have you, and it his let's see here. Yeah, and he brought back. I mean, again, sort of, and maybe we can compare this to Robespierre. Robespierre, he his so with his sort of transcendent, unseen world, which was the cult of the supreme being. One of the problems, and this is something that Carlyle does talk about, is everything that the great man has to do, it has to have a foundation to it, and he sort of likes to use the analogy of bricklaying as being that sort of foundation. And I guess taking that sort of thought, what foundation does the cult of the sort of enlightenment-esque, atheistic cult of the supreme being, what sort of foundation does that have in French, amongst the French people, beyond the sort of academic sort of bourgeois class? What foundation does that have? It has no foundation at all, and of course it failed immensely, and not so long after, Robespierre lost his head and everything, and so that being an abject failure. But the war in France on the church and the sort of dominant faith, that being Roman Catholicism. Of course, Napoleon being this figure of great, this, I guess he understood the sort of metaphysical, transcendent belief that this emperor should have. I mean, remember, he modeled himself off the Roman emperors, but the fact that he believed he was brought to France, brought onto Earth with a purpose, and you see here he's sort of ticking these boxes that was it's been laid out, and that plus his military career and fighting back the coalition in France, going on to to his conquest in Italy and Egypt and everything, especially in his Egypt, which was his biggest coup that really captivated amongst the French people, because of not because it had any significant territorial gain, that being Egypt, just because the fact that Egypt is the legacy of it is an ancient a nation filled with ancient kingdoms, ancient empires, ancient societies, and the sort of honor and the grandeur of the land of the pharaohs, and being able to conquer that, and it's I mean, in that was sort of a war to beyond stopping hampering the British supply lines from the Mediterranean to India, to the traders in India. It was also a sort of myth building, building a myth. Napoleon building this myth around him, and this sort of romanticized vision, which is something that, again, you don't see very quality in many people today. And so one of the other qualities of the king is that they are noble, the noble men, true of heart and of justice, and of course faithful to the religion. And that, again, you're talking Napoleonic Code, his sort of, again, rising from chaos, creating order, made him this this sort of clean slate to sort of create this sort of meritocracy, which had never been experienced before. But he was sort of wanting to get the best out of his people, and ultimately this sort of system was very, very much endured him, and even to this day, which is much of the French sort of system, political legal system, is actually sort of still based off the Napoleonic Code. So it obviously had been revolutionary, and not revolutionary in the sense of sort of the sort of Jacobins and the other sort of revolutionary clubs at the time, where it was more about sort of social justice than like proto-communism as such, than the actual genuine realignment in political policy. And the other quality that the great man, king, should have is that the idea needs to continue beyond and become accepted truth of this his legacy and truth of society. So, as I mentioned before, it's no good doing great things as a king. You need to you really need to have this complete control over everything surrounding you, to the extent that anything you want to do, whatever ambition or goal, I mean, and the goal is very important in this, that if it is like a dramatic change or shift in society, that it has, that this change and drastic shift will become effectively the new normal, will become the normal, and then become the tradition, and then become just pure reality, accepted truth in all history. And I mean, I do think back to someone like Constantine and everything, the sort of conversion to Christianity, and how that played out, and how the legacy that existed from that, and how it continued, and the actions he took as well, and his successors took, that to the point where it became an accepted truth that Rome was a Christian empire. It was always a Christian empire, and an indicator of how do we know that we're in a time when we are under the rule of, and this is under rule of weakness, under a chaotic era of weak, inefficient, hedonistic leaders, and Carlyle points out, and just this, I like this quote, because this is I wonder if any of you guys watching can sort of guess maybe who I'm thinking of when he refers to this. So he says, in this world we will eliminate, we would be remained with a sickly, discontent, foolish man, and not mentioning any US presidents, but you sort of guess that there is this sort of prediction from him, but in many ways it sort of happened before. you had was it Louis the 15th, sort of king. It was in the French Revolution, sort of history of the French Revolution, but by Carlyle, who talked about like this king who was effectively Louis the 15th, afraid of death. Would you go round to had this sort of strain of obsession with the burials and all that sort of stuff, and would go around and graveyards and be asking about how many people were buried today and everything, and he was reign was relatively short, and he was a sort of sickly old man and everything, and of course crown went to his son, the final king of France, and but yeah, the leaders represent the poor leaders. It's are what cause decline, not so much what happens in the world around them, and that's sort of a thing that I think is something that you come across when you look at history. That and maybe there's because I know that I've in the past I've given a lot of like these some of these monarchs and rulers, kings of the past, a bit of an attitude saying, well, they inherited a very sort of bad situation, but the trouble is if they're incompetent with their rule, and they are they have no vision, they have no qualities of being a what we say about the wise man, all-knowing man, and this great king figure, then what hope? They can't achieve anything in reality. So that's what I got here for the figure. So with all that said, going forward into our age, and title of the stream here is that we do face a sort of wider problem that someone like Thomas Carlyle probably couldn't anticipate. We live in an age where propaganda is on demand and instant, and it's 100 times easier than from his time for it to be manipulated to a mass audience. And for that, and even though it's easier refuted, though, so I mean there is that going for us, but overall, it is something which cannot be understated. That, and I've seen this in sort of media recently, but it's like where this great man, whether he's alive today, born to our age, or isn't yet to be born, it doesn't matter, because we live in a sort of society which is completely devoid of the transcendent, from the unseen world, from any sort of religious belief, as I say, beyond creed and denomination, but just centered in that sort of worldview, which will make it difficult for this figure to rise and to operate within, but not impossible, but difficult. But this will be for the great, the great heroic man to come to, and a lot of these decisions you'll find is going forward. The great man this will be his job and his decision to make these decisions. It's something that he will have to come to at the time when the time is ready. And as I stated on Twitter before, this all we can do is support him in his his endeavor, and that and I think we will know when we see him, because as I said, he will be drawn to. We'll be drawn to him as like a fountain of light, and he will be having his perception of the world will be drastically different from everyone else's, and he will have a genuine vision of change. And this gets on to the crux of it. Will will this man come through the political? I mean, I don't think he'll be coming through the political route, and I think the problem is liberal democracy. Is I mean, it is at its half life. It has reached its half life, and I don't think as time progresses, and I'm near enough genuinely certain at this point that it when it, again it's going to all come crashing down, and it's not going to cut. This figure is not going to come from um, a from the sort of normal political routes at this moment in time that we exist within. And that's why I've been very skeptical of when I've been thinking about Zemmour in France. He is saying all the right things, and I've only just heard of him during recent his presidential bid, but um, he I'm even if he does win, which I'm remember what they did to Trump, so that's all I say on that matter. But even if he does win somehow, the it's not so much, and we all know this because we've talked about this endlessly. But we know that being president or prime minister doesn't mean you're actually in control. The power that lies behind it all, the civil service, the bureaucracy in the sort of the permanent state civil service, the media, the banks, the NGOs, the internationalist organizations, all of these groups that work together. That is the real power broker. I guess the cathedral, the decentralized network of people who all believe in this same creed, the same belief system. That is what our great man in the future will have to fight against, and how he fights against it, the way he fights against it. I think it might be through force. I don't think it's not going to be through the political routes, because it will not. By the time he comes around, I don't even think that the political routes will be present and available. And I mean, the indicators of this the great man going forward. Where it come from doesn't really matter. As long as it comes from his, as long as it comes from a position of strength, and as long as it comes from a position of truth and justice and ideals which do exist, like not vague, whimsical, easily dropped ideas that you see with the current sort of politicians and such, but genuine ideas with a genuine vision and will to enact them and change. And he will be heavily resisted. And I noticed, and this is something on the last part when I say he'll be vilified. So we've seen with the new law that in media, and I've been trying to wrap my head around why the progressive, the POS types have taken great interest in going after writings in literature that like Lord of the Rings, like Tolkien's work, like there's something like Star Wars, even as like a film based, but more writings, and then trying to sort of remove writers like Enid Blythe and even today, what was I? What was it? Tolkien, Tolkien and such, to discourage parents from reading sort of classical old novels and stories and books and epics and sort of read more modern, diverse, quote unquote, which is By the way, it's code word for anti-white. But that being said, um, diversity and inclusion and all the usual buzzwords. And so I've been wondering why there's elements of them wanting to effectively destroy and eliminate from libraries, from public libraries and such, but also to redefine and reinterpret great works like Tolkien's Middle Earth and Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit in and sort of put like this progressive skin suit, wearing the face of Middle Earth, and it's because in such of these old works they actually do tap into the great man theory and of kings and priests and prophets and divinity and such. And I mean, in my genuine belief, that the reason why is that it's about securing their own power. And one of the biggest fears, and I think this is why there's a fear amongst the progressives, and why you have this irrational fear of neo-Nazis and force being used against them, force being used against the progressives, I mean, is because that they are actually genuinely afraid that this great man figure will come and vanquish them, and that they understand that this that they understand that inspiration for the great man could come from Lord of the Rings. It could come from these sort of works which tell these sort of stories. And so for them, this is a top-down societal change. They want to normalize race and gender fetishes in society. And I think that I actually think this is why they want to normalize it, because it is something that they can distract and remove um, any elements of the old world of the idea of the transcendent and of nature itself. And then this is like the continuous progress, as I talked about before. This is the continuous progressive war against nature, and um, I think that one of the things that, and I always thought that the sort of the big neo-Nazi fear, not the Nazi fear, the sort of boogeyman of what they call Nazi, um, is not it's something I always thought was just sort of mindless buzzword, but actually I think there does hold some weight to it in that they genuinely they fear the, the great man emerging from the ashes that they've created, who would vanquish them, that would absolutely destroy them, and they'd brush them aside. And Carlyle talked about it, about these sort of people when the great man does appear, that he is in the faces of these people, these abject failures and weaklings in society. They will brush them aside, literally just poof, just knock them back, and they would before him they would appear nothing. Like all the sort of revolutionary leaders that survived in France with Napoleon he brushed them aside. He and that nothing that they could do could change the sort of fact of the matter is of Napoleon's rise to power. And so hopefully we will see this sort of similar thing going forward, of the current order being brushed aside. Even today, I mean, you have number 11, the civil servants, doing they want to remove, they want to do a review, which is basically we're going to remove it and we're just doing a way to justify it, an image of James II, one of our kings, and this is something. This is something that only comes from weak weak individuals. And just to say, Nathan Hood, we're coming to the end here, so we'll probably do a bit of stuff with chat. So Nathan Hood says, think how Greenwell Wormtongue slanders Gandalf as a liar and Ema as a warmonger. And weakling despises great men. Yeah, I mean, Lord of the Rings is a brilliant example because we've all seen the memes of like Boris and the Theoden King when he's under the sort of spell enchantment of Saruman in that sort of old state that he looks like a sort of a man, poisoned and everything, and it's very much the case. And Greenwell Wormtongue, he is like the civil servant. He is he is really that sort of disgusting creature that sort of that you find in there. But it's very important. He sows discontent within the hero network. He understands who they are, and this is the thing: is you have to remember, everything he did, he understood what he was doing. Green Wormtongue, that was. He understood what he was doing. He understood that, obviously being a servant of evil, that he understood that his actions were to further weaken and effectively betray his own people. And that's something that I don't know how many people in this country have woken up to it yet. That these people absolutely despise you and would love to see you broken and dead in the streets, and they'd laugh about it. And that is where we are at the moment. And a lot of these great men in history, is the reason why they gained the position of great men, is effectively they when you have these sort of Green Wormtongue figures, they are the people who are I mean, they are effectively cut. The rotting element is cut away and disposed of in any sort of fashion. And I've at the moment we have a complete system that's just rotten all over, and we're waiting for our great wise man to come along, and or able man, I should say, to come along and cut away the rot and deliver us a golden age. So another from Nathan Hood. They are malicious and motivated by malice. They desire to destroy others' lives out of bitterness, like Saruman in the scouring of the Shire. Yeah, that is correct. Bitterness, jealousy. It's really funny because I was in 2017. I was in London. Was it 2016? It was 2016. It was just after the referendum vote, and it was about a few weeks after, and there was this was at a time where there was a sort of a cracks. Obviously, the first cracks in the system was, and I would say this would be competing elites between sort of the Brexit elite class in this country and the Remain elite class, who were divided on the issue at hand, the subject matter at hand. And I remember going up to I was at a hotel and at a bar there, and you hear people coming in who I presume to be city workers. One of them was doing cocaine in the toilet, so that's my assumption of why they're city workers. But they were talking about, this group of them were talking about Brexit and the people, the type of people who voted for it, being these deeply racist, fascist thugs who live in backward villages and backward rural settings, and it was really, really bitter, very, very um, sort of I mean, without using their terms, bigoted statement of complete falsities, and I was quite taken back that you know this was their sort of reaction to it of their fellow countrymen, but you have to remember in the current order that we have, these sort of people, especially the city worker types that I was mentioning there, they view themselves as being part of no nation because they're not part of any nation. They're part of this uh, wider global network. And as one of them was saying, they were talking about one night they're going to be in New York, then they're going to be in Amsterdam, then they're going to be they're going to fly off to Morocco, and for them the concept of a people, of a place, of a uh, of commonality and of unity is just completely devoid of these people. And um, in many ways, their dehumanization and their treatment of their fellow countrymen is rather interesting because it it's the one of the first um, indicators of genocide, of of mass murder, of that sort of stuff, starts with dehumanization of their own people. And it may not happen, but I don't know. I mean, a few years ago, if you told me that things like with lockdowns and what's being proposed now would happen, I wouldn't believe it. But that it's important to state that in the last 2 years, that there's been a massive power shift. Whether it's been dramatic in the sense of elites within the power, elites within the network have gained more power, or that I think there is an element more of the case that the mask has come off, and they want the mask off, and they want people to know that there is no mask anymore. This is how we operate. Get used to it. So that's how I think it sort of it's going down at the moment. But one thing that'd be quite interesting as a sort of test or study is, even if they manage to eradicate, and when I say they, I mean the progressives are able to in this current society to eradicate all knowledge and ideals that of sort of the basic nature of the concept of the great man and the virtues that go with it. Even if they are able to eradicate it all from sort of the public conscious and public thought, will people will generations to come still be able to reconnect with it on the metaphysical transcendent level, but also uh, on the sort of natural level of their feelings and of their wants and desires? Would they be able to reconnect with it, even if they've been bred and taught into them to believe something completely unnatural? And that's something I've always thought, because I wonder if the natural urge of this is so strong that it, no matter what propaganda, um, what force they use, it still will not be able, that the sort of the will of the hero will still overcome. I mean, that's something I do wonder, because I think it will, but again, I mean, this is stuff that we say the great man, whether he's a king, whether he's a poet or priest or what have you, or in the way that he conducts himself. This will be for him to decide. And yes, Nathan said, one can hope. Yeah, one can hope. I mean, I will say this, maybe on a final note, because I might wrap up here. I think one of the white pills that we can take away from this is that if you look throughout human history, there have been sort of, and I think also Steve Bannon referred to it as like the fourth turning, like the points in history where there's been a major events where there's been a massive turning, and then you have like your heroes, your heroic willed men in that sort of fourth turning period who would then sort of usher in and the next age, the next sort of period, and then you have like this sort of great era of peace and prosperity and all that sort of stuff. And we're the general belief is that we're in that fourth turning period, and the fact that it's happened in many generations before, maybe arguably even in worse conditions. I mean, we're definitely maybe not be the worst, but it's the most cringiest condition we're in, to say the least. But if we follow what the laws of nature have already set out for us, we can effectively be safe in the knowledge that that we will be that the hero figure will arrive, and when he does, we have to act accordingly. I'm not saying, of course, while before do nothing and just wait for this guy to arrive, obviously, but to still go out and do what we need to do to sort of enable for this figure to arise. But still go out and do everything. I don't know, maybe one of you listening might be that hero, that heroic willed man, and we'll be able to usher in the sort of grand new Pax Christium era of a sort of rejuvenated, revitalized West. I don't know, maybe that's all pie in but maybe still go out, still do things, still work towards your aims and still network locally. You had the basket weavers is one that's done really well over the last year or so. So something like that, network within this group, and we will triumph in the end, because that I'm sure of. Because maybe it's you, Shara Tory, next leader of the Conservatives. I'm actually of the position that the Conservatives is such a tainted brand at this point. Even if I was to do to be the leader, I might even just change the name of the party. I might just like literally chuck them all out, clean slate, start again. Just complete clean slate. Would I don't know if I'm that next leader. I don't know if I got that. I mean, I like to think that I faced down a journalist once. They're not that scary. They're annoying, but I don't understand how people can get like you get like these conservatives who get really scared of journalists. I don't understand that. It's like, I mean, just go into a room and they're going to like treat you like shit. So, I mean, what do you expect? But yeah, I don't think I'm that next person. I unfortunately, I think it'd be someone greater, which maybe a young corporal in the military at the moment who's watching this. That maybe you might be that person, our next emperor. So anyway, thank you, Nathan Hood, for coming on in the chat. and thank you everyone for watching. And so yeah, this is what I've just been sort of laying out here is my thoughts, something I've been thinking of, and we've got a discussion I think coming up with the Mallard on something of this matter of like the future of where conservatism can go from, and what tactics can be used in the future. And I don't know, maybe if I am that one, I hope maybe I can sort of come up with some tactics to some sort of tactics to sort of fight back against. But I mean that remains to be seen. I mean, effectively, it just comes down to just Stalinistic purging of the civil service and the universities and the media and the banks and the NGOs, just locking them all up. I mean, it's not really that difficult as well. I mean, state of emergency. We've got precedent with lockdowns. Just do instead of having like COVID lockdowns, you have lefty midwit lockdowns. I mean that's my policy. Public health for progressivism is affecting mental and public health. I mean, could I get I mean, I need a propaganda sort of expert to sort of frame it in a way that can the public can get behind. That's my point. I mean, if I propose that to the public, I don't know how that would go down. I mean, I'll probably have significant support, but that's something that's sort of like my policy. But yeah, as I say, we'll talk to Mallard about it, like tactics going forward. Maybe think about something of what can be done, if anything. Though, as I look forward, if you want to get involved, you can go to follow my channel and on the Wellington Project and what have you, and and the Mallard, and check out for the sort of Twitter Spaces, because there's a lot going on at the moment with that sort of stuff. But apart from that, thank you everyone for tuning in, and thank you Nathan Hood, and I'll see you all guys later.